So, welcome back to the Prescription to Travel MD podcast. This is the show where we talk about all things travel, how to travel better, how to live better. And so today, we're diving into the world of sustainable travel with a very special guest, Dr. Kelly Wright. She is a fellow physician and a passionate advocate for eco-conscious travel, and she's also a points and miles expert. And so I've watched from afar as she's taken many fantastic points and miles adventures. And she's also shared some of her thoughts on how we can be more intentional in how we travel. So I was a little curious about, how we can do all these things. How can we take the steps to travel in a way that fits with our lifestyle, fits with our way of travel, how we like to travel, while also being mindful of our footprint. And so here we are. And so whether you're a seasoned traveler or you're just getting started, this conversation will inspire you to explore the world in a way that's kinder to our environment and also more beneficial to everyone and anyone and anything that's involved. So let's get started. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for that introduction. I think you touched on every single topic that I love to talk about.
Well, I always like to start by learning a little bit more about the background of my guest. So tell us a little bit more about your journey into medicine, into surgery, and all the things.
Absolutely. So I'll start from the beginning. I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and I went to college in Texas to become an engineer. I was very math and science oriented, as many of us are, and I loved the idea of engineering and got to go on some international trips in college, and then decided I liked really interacting on the human level with people rather than on the systems level as an engineer, so decided to go into medicine. And I went to medical school in Texas as well. I always knew I wanted to do surgery, but didn't know what field that would look like. And as I went through all my rotations, really decided that I wanted to pursue surgery through OBGYN. So I did a residency in OBGYN at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. And then I did a fellowship in minimally invasive GYN surgery also in Boston. So today I am now in Los Angeles, where I practice as a division director for an academic medical center as a minimally invasive GYN surgeon. And what we do is take care of non-cancerous GYN conditions, things like fibroids, endometriosis, pelvic organ prolapse, congenital anomalies, and things like that. So that's how I got into medicine, and that's what I do, and that's why I spend 3 to 4 days a week in the operating room or doing procedures, because we're very high volume surgeons, and I love what I do and being able to make a difference for our patients.
Well, you're doing all that and you're still managing to, to take all these trips. Every time I look up, I'm like, oh, where's she at today?
I think as a division director, it is really important to set a model that my group really trust each other and cover each other. And so we really believe in having a system of coordinating our time off together, as opposed to like asking for permission. When I first started, we had an assistant, and they're like, so-and-so wants to take off vacation. You need to sign this form. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not giving somebody permission to take time off. We're just going to coordinate it as a group, and we're all going to cover each other. And so we really tried to set that into motion. And I'm very lucky because I make the call schedule for us. But I just tell everybody, okay, every 6 months, put all of your time off on your calendar, and then we're going to work out the coverage for all that time. And 7 years in, it has really worked for us, and it's created a lot of autonomy for us, which I also think is really important in medicine.
Wow. I wish other practices would adopt that model, because I feel like it's very hard within this, like the system that we've created. Like there's this attitude that it's a privilege to be able to take the time off, and that you get this certain amount of time off and that's it.
Right.
And so I have a friend that I was talking to recently, and she was saying how like she completely missed her, like it was like a wedding or something that she had planned. And they told her that she couldn't take time off because she didn't have any more time left. And then what happened is, and she's an anesthesiologist, during that week, they canceled like surgeries. It was like during spring break or something. So they ended up canceling the surgeries. And so she didn't even have to go into work. But they told her in advance that she couldn't take the time off, So
It's terrible.
she missed this, huge event because, they weren't very flexible, and they weren't very understanding of needing to have time for yourself and, to be able to make these special occasions. And then she didn't even go to work anyway. And she still missed, And so she didn't stay at that job for very long. She found herself a new environment that she could thrive in, and so kudos to you for creating that for your coworkers and your colleagues. 'Cause it's so important.
It's important for those of us in positions of leadership, it's important to model. I also my first job in Boston, where I worked for 5 years after my training, it was also like a no autonomy model, and we just don't operate that way, you know? You need to give people goals. We're all very intrinsically motivated, and we're motivated to take care of our patients. And if you are doing surgery, I mean, that's 24/7. You need to be available to your patients. There's no part-time. There's no, like, you're off. You just have to have coverage, and so I decided that was really important for us. And there's really good data, of course, now showing, like, if we don't take time off, if we're tired, we're less sympathetic, we prescribe less pain medication. There are certain numbers of surgeries you can do where you start having more complications if you're worn out and you're getting overuse injuries. So I think the data now is really on our side. It's just up to us to implement it so that we can have these sustainable careers. I know we talk about sustainable travel, but sustainability is also like, how do you sustain yourself in a career to be able to do this long term? I think is, yeah, really important to talk about as well.
Right. So you do a really good job of finding balance between work and travel, being able to take good care of your patients and also taking good care of yourself. And I know one of the ways that you do that is through the use of points and miles. So how did you get started in points and miles?
Yeah, I love points and miles so much. It's like my hobby. I started about 10 years ago. So my wife is in footwear. She's a footwear developer for major brands. So she has a really cool job because she's making shoes. And she's always traveling overseas to go to different factories and work on these projects. And it started through her because she was traveling so much and racking up all these miles with airlines and racking up all these hotel nights and getting this elite status. So she was starting to understand a little bit about what that meant. And there was one year, this was, I think, 2014, 2015. This was an American Airlines only had 3 levels of status. And she was about to reach the top level of status with American, but she was needed a little bit more. And in those days, the only way to get those miles were to fly. You couldn't do it through all these other engagement types with the program like you can today. And so they sent her an email and they offered her what was called a buy-up, which is where if you spend $1,000, they'll get you to this next level of status without you having to get on a plane and get those miles, what we call butt and seat miles. And so we talked about it. And I was just a few years out of training, so we didn't have tons of extra disposable income. And we're like, is it really worth it to do this buy-up? How can a higher level of status be better than this middle level that you already have? So I started Googling. It literally took me to the Points Guy webpage, which I'd seen but never read before. And I think it was a Saturday or Sunday, and I just, like, sat down, and for 8 hours, I was just reading through the blog. I just went down the rabbit hole right then, and I realized, like, "Oh, this is a thing." So I knew the concept of, like, you can earn miles, and you can earn miles on a credit card, but I didn't understand the redeeming, and I didn't understand all the different options there were out there. We decided to do the buy-up after all my reading, and then that really led to learning how to maximize the benefits out of our status, which included just a few months later, we were coming back from London, and we were upgraded to business class because they had done an aircraft swap and there weren't enough economy seats. So because she was high-level status, boop, we got bumped up, which was incredible. That was the first time in a lie-flat seat, and I was like, "This is it. I'm never going back." Um, and so that started the journey. What has come since then is I continue to read a lot. I continue to read a lot of the blogs every day. I continue to listen to podcasts and continue to learn about these programs. And mostly I like to focus on what are called transferable points. And so those are points that you earn on credit cards that can be moved to multiple different types of loyalty programs. So some people might have heard of things like the Chase Sapphire Reserve, which gets Chase Ultimate Rewards. That's a type of transferable point. that you can earn those points, and then you could transfer it to different airlines. So you could transfer it to Flying Blue, which is Air France and KLM. You could transfer it to United. You could transfer it to British Airways, Avios, and it just opens up so many more options. Because I think with us, with physicians in general, flexibility is the name of the game. And we're not people who can just take off tomorrow and jump on a plane. If we don't have that level of flexibility, then we need to have it in the type of points that we have, because that opens up many different programs. And say one airline doesn't have the reward that we want, but another airline does, and we can transfer the points to that airline that has the award availability. So that was a little bit long-winded, but that's really where I started. And then today I keep track of all my redemptions in a spreadsheet, and I think I'm up to around 6.5 million points that I've redeemed for over $425,000 worth of travel over the past 10 years, which is just an insane amount. I can't believe it. And much more than we could even afford on a physician's salary. So it's really exciting. These are real financial things, especially as you're coming out of training and you have a lot of debt and we feel like we're catching up on life, to be able to offset those costs and then later on to be able to travel how you want to is how I see the points evolution. So it's been a really, really fun journey.
Yeah. Well, I'm just getting started in my points journey, and I'm already like seeing some of the benefits of it, and it's mind blowing that like it's been around for this long, and like, I just never knew. And so once I found out about it, and like there were all these other little things that kind of fell into place, and I'm like, you know what? I need to start a podcast. I need to start telling people about like all these amazing things, so
Yeah,
like,
I love it.
and like physicians, like I think we're again in a very good position where we can earn lots of points, even though like anyone can earn points. So it's not just physicians, it's not just people with high levels of expenses, but even if you have low expenses, you can, earn lots of points and miles for travel, and to be able to take these like trips that you like only dream of, because there's like some of the things that we do and places that we go, there's no way I would like pay cash for them,
100%.
Right. Or I don't know, maybe if I had like 10 times what I earn now, maybe I would, but like
Which hospital wants to pay us 10 times more than what we're earning right now?
right. So, but you meet so many people, and like physicians like have all these points and they have no idea what to do with them. And so I'm like, you know what? You've got points that are just sitting there like, let me help you spend them. Let me show you the way. So, I love that you brought up the point about being able to earn like points in different categories and being able to use them flexibly, so that way you can have the option. If you don't have scheduling flexibility, you have flexibility in terms of how you can travel and where you can go.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you're spreading the word, because I totally agree that physicians are really poised to take advantage of this. It's a game. It's a fun game, but it's also like you said, a real financial benefit. And because I think we're poised to, because we do have high expenses. I mean, even just like our licensing, our memberships, our DEA, just renewing that every year is thousands of dollars. Our CME every year is usually thousands of dollars and involves travel. You can also earn points on things like rent and student loans, which we usually have. So we're just used to high expenses and so if we optimize those high expenses, then we can get their return, because we're very much what they call Henrys, I think, in the financial world, high income, not rich yet. Most of us have high incomes, but we have low wealth. So it's great if we can offset the costs of these luxuries, and I consider travel a luxury and a privilege. And then we can use our cash to contribute to our savings, to pay off our loans, to pay off our mortgages. That's really where I see the benefit coming in.
Right. And I think a lot of people get confused because they think about credit cards. I know like myself, when I first got a credit card, or after I learned about the bad things about credit cards, I was like, I'm swearing off credit cards. And then I realized, oh, like if you use it responsibly, like this can really like benefit you. And again, you can take the money that you're saving, not spending it on a trip, and put it towards your savings account, and you are building wealth. And so it is a very great wealth building tool for high income earners, not rich yet.
Yes.
Just like us. Yeah.
And I want people to, when you have credit cards, yeah, you just have to have the mindset that you are paying it off every month. that this is not a substitute for the income, that you're just paying it off every month. But a lot of people have a misconception that opening lots of cards is damaging to your credit score, where actually the FICO credit score is very, very transparent about how it's graded and how you're graded. Unlike something like Pressganey, which is, proprietary and opaque and a really bad system. FICO credit score is actually a very good system and was created to create fairness so that people could be judged based on things like prior payments or their credit history, as opposed to, what the banker thinks of them and all their biases. And one of the biggest impact factors to your credit score is your payment history. And the second biggest impact factor is what's called credit utilization. And what that is how much credit you're using. So every time you open a card, they give you a credit limit. And then how much of that limit you're using is your utilization. So say you get a $10,000 credit limit and you put a $1,000 charge on it, that's a 10% credit utilization. As you open more cards, your credit limit goes up and up and up and up, but your utilization goes down, assuming that you're not like matching the spending on every single one. And those are the two biggest factors of your credit score. So that's why opening more cards over time actually raises your credit score as opposed to lowering it. And I currently have 31 cards with me and my wife, that people think that's crazy. Again, it's been over like 10 years. So this didn't all happen in one year. I don't recommend going zero to that. But our credit scores are close to 850 because we have that high level of credit limit and low utilization. And that's just, again, playing the algorithm. That's what they reward. And so those are the behaviors that they reward.
And I love that you say those things, because I preach this to people who are really hesitant. Then they're like, oh yeah, I want a card. And they're like, oh, but I can't open another card. And so I'm going to be sharing this with everyone so that they can hear it come from someone other than myself, so that they can realize, hey, it really does. It helps your credit score if you're using it responsibly and if you are opening more cards. And it helps your lifestyle, because then you can travel and, do all the things without spending more than you would normally. So I love that you do all these things with points and miles, and that you also focus on being able to travel sustainably. So how is it that you're able to find places and do things that are considered environmentally and, socially conscious, and still be able to enjoy the luxury of traveling with points and miles?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thanks for bringing up this topic. I got into sustainability through healthcare because I was really upset at the waste I was seeing in the operating room every day. We were just, and you're there so many days a week and you're seeing it go out. It's really overwhelming. It's something we've normalized. That's not normal. But a lot of us think about, oh, airlines are bad, cars are bad, and they have issues. But healthcare creates more than double the amount of emissions of aviation every year, which is actually kind of outstanding if you think about it, because we've never been taught to scrutinize our own industry. And it's even been calculated like how many carbon emissions it is to perform a laparoscopic hysterectomy. And I can take that and say, oh, I perform 4 of those a day, or I get on a flight. It's actually less for me to do a transcontinental round trip flight than to operate a full day in the operating
Wow.
room. So the most carbon intensive thing that we do is go to work every day. And so I really focus on trying to fix that by reducing single-use items and healthcare waste. But a couple of the ways that I translate this into my travel life is trying to focus on those experiences that are sustainable experiences. And so what do I mean by that? We live in a big city. I live in Los Angeles. So it's a huge city surrounded by people all the time. So when we go on vacation, we typically like to go out into nature or seeing wild animals. Well, like safaris, seeing animals, those really interest me. And not to be a downer about it, but also as we're losing biodiversity, these are things that I hope to see and preserve, hopefully not before they're gone, but there is a little bit of urgency to seeing some of these places. When we're choosing our vacations, I really look at the points as offsetting the corporate costs. So I'm offsetting the cost of my flights or I'm offsetting the cost of my positioning hotel, maybe my hotel at an airport or hotel in the city that I'm staying at en route to somewhere. so that when I'm at a destination, I can choose maybe a more expensive place because I'm putting all of my money into that experience. I think a good example of this is that earlier this year in February, just one of my favorite trips ever, we went on a tiger safari in India. In northern India, there's a park called Ranthambore National Park, and they've done an amazing job of preserving the tiger population there. It's amazing for such a populous country that they've actually done quite a good job of preserving their animal populations. Um, we stayed at like a safari camp, essentially, that was started by somebody who grew up in the area, whose father was a documentary filmmaker making documentaries about the tigers, and decided that he wanted to stay and conserve the area, bought the land, opened this hotel, this camp, and made it really a luxury experience for people to come and see the tigers. And so part of that sustainable process is not only does the money go to conservation, the hotel is right on the edge of the park and they're buying that land to protect it. But also all levels of the staff at the hotel were local, from the local community. And that's not just like the lowest paid workers, it's all the way up to the upper levels of management. We're all from the local community. So all of these surrounding communities are getting the benefits of having these animals survive. And that's how we think about it. I've heard the sentiment like there's no animal that will survive which does not allow the human to thrive. And so when we're looking at places, when we're looking at experiences where we're seeing animals, safaris, again, we want to make sure that most of that money is going to the local community, that community members are employed at all levels of the staff up to the management, and that part of that expense is going to direct conservation. And so that's how I look at it. And these are more expensive experiences because that's what it takes to pay people living wages to support this life. But if we can offset the cost of the travel to get there, then we can put our travel funds into those experiences. And I like that idea of supporting a community rather than doing something like exploitative to a community. Like, I'm here to see something, but I don't care how it affects the community. I think we're privileged enough to be able to choose the experiences which are sustainable and support those communities.
And so how do you find something like this? Because it's not something I've ever heard of before. I mean, I've heard of like sustainable travel and like the things that in theory, but how do you go about finding an experience to see tigers in India on a, you know,
Right? How do I? I always wonder that too. I think it comes down to also reading and following trusted sources. I follow a travel agency called Indigari Travel, which is woman-owned, woman-run, doing more high-end, sustainable travel. We have an agent who books our safaris, and my questions are always like, how are they supporting the community? How is this giving back to conservation? How is the money being spent? So asking those questions and then reading articles, even things like Travel and Leisure, I find some really great experiences and then looking in those areas for the more sustainable experiences. I think people are wanting that. I'm seeing that as a trend in the travel industry, especially at high end, that people are wanting these more kind of intimate, boutique, and supportive experiences, community experiences. And so asking those questions is very important. I'm still, of course, learning as I go. I'm not perfect at this. None of us are, but just trying to be mindful about those decisions. On a much smaller scale, there's the simple things you can do when you're traveling that are more sustainable, like not using single-use plastics. I always bring my water bottle and my coffee thermos, so I never have to take anything single-use. I even have like a little TSA-approved utensil set that I can bring, or bring the silicone bags I could put food from the lounge in, instead of buying something single-use wrapped. There are absolutely the little things that you can do when traveling, and the most sustainable thing you can do when traveling is cutting down on your waste, so not using single-use plastics.
Yeah, I think a lot of us aim for these like luxurious experiences, and some of these may be once in a lifetime experiences for us, or or more than once in a lifetime if you travel with points. But even like you said, on a smaller scale, so if you're going away for the weekend and it's just like a quick getaway, or maybe you don't you're like a budget traveler, which, we do a lot of budget travel too in between like the big trips that people see us taking. So tips and tricks to minimize your footprint on Earth and when you're traveling on a lower scale.
Yeah, and if it's interesting because if you go to other countries like the UK or the EU, and you'll see many of their regulations in place against single-use plastic, even in your hotel room, you'll see glasses with a refillable glass water bottle. You'll see Nespresso cups for your coffee maker instead of something plastic and single use. Whereas in the US, it's like, "Oh, I'm going to Hilton, and one of my elite benefits is to get 2 water bottles every day," you know? Um, so really foregoing these things in the US, it's again, less expensive too not to buy these things or not to buy stuff at the airport and to bring your own. But also on my surveys, when you leave a hotel and they send you a survey, I'll always compliment what was great about the stay, but I always make a point to say, don't want the single use things in the room. It's nicer to have a nicer coffee pot or a kettle. It's nicer to have a glass water bottle that's refilled as opposed to plastic water bottles. Those things are nicer. Those things are elite benefits. So I always comment that on the survey. And I think consumer behavior can drive change quite quite a bit more slowly than regulations. And I presume we're not going to get regulations for a very long time, but consumer behavior can still change some of that.
Right. And it's refreshing to hear you say those things because I know like people balk at like paper straws and like, all these things. But even like in New York when they did away with like plastic straws, New York is, a huge city, lots of people. And so my sister was living there for a while and she had her little metal straw that she would take with her everywhere she went.
I love
So I
it.
love that you're embracing that, and I hope more people will embrace that and not be afraid of change just because it's something that's different, especially when it's something that's beneficial. And it's not really I don't see how it's like how it's hurting you to like, have to.
To bring your own thing. And I mean, and it's important for human health. And we think about that in medicine, right? If we think only 8% of plastics are actually recycled. So despite our best intentions and wish cycling, most of the plastic you use is going into the trash, into the landfill. And we're seeing more and more data come out about microplastics in humans and how that is affecting us. There was a New England Journal article about microplastics in carotid plaques and the risk of cardiovascular disease related to that. So these things actually do affect human health. And the more you interact with single-use plastics, actually, the more you ingest as well. So the more you are exposed. And so whatever you can do, this is not to fearmonger and say, never, never touch plastic again. It's impossible in our world. But once you know these things, then maybe you can make changes that are less expensive for you, better for the earth, and better for human health.
Yeah, so I sent my husband a post this morning. I'm like, "Hey, we gotta get rid of all the candles and, our nonstick cookware," and he just says his reply was, "We're done for," like,
Yeah,
you can't do anything. I was like, "Those cutting boards have to go," like.
it's true. It can be totally overwhelming. So start small, bring your reusable water bottle. Honestly, starting there is just huge. And this is all at scale, right? You reduce one plastic water bottle, but on a trip you do this 10 times and then you multiply it by maybe a few other people who are doing it again at scale. It starts to make a difference.
Yeah, so little things, so little changes, you don't have to all of a sudden overhaul your life or, get rid of all your cookware.
Right, exactly. Because that's less sustainable when you have to like buy all new stuff. So
Right, right, but little things, and like you said, the little things add up. So what's next on your bucket list of travel?
well, we had some really amazing trips this past year. Like the tire safari was so special. Last month we went to South Africa and did a safari in Sabi Sands, which was also just an incredible trip. And flew all on points to get there, and then paid cash for the experience. Next year we'll be going to Morocco and staying in the Atlas Mountains and doing some hiking. I'm really excited about that. we'll be going to China and staying in the Aman hotels, which I love the Aman hotel chain, and it's super expensive in the US and Caribbean and Europe, but in Asia, it's actually very reasonable, and so a great way to experience those hotels if you'd like to. They're in remote areas, so we'll be looking forward to hiking in those areas as well. And then we usually do 2 or 3 international trips per year. We started with 1 when we started our points journey, and then we're like, "Let's do 2. Why not? We have the points. Let's do it." And then we went up to 3, and we're like, "Okay, 3 is like the max for the amount of time off that we can both take." But we are actually going to spend a week in Yellowstone at the end of the season doing a wolf and elk animal viewing trip. So, in lieu of that third international trip, we're doing something more local to see our own lands, and really excited about that. We'll be using points for all of our flights and then paying cash for most of the stuff on the ground. Though I do have, I think, 3 nights at the brand new Park Hyatt Marrakesh, which, well, I got on points, which I'm very excited about. So, yeah. So that's what we'll be doing.
So I have to ask, so what's been your favorite flight thus far? Because you fly a lot of amazing airlines and
I've been really lucky to fly lots of great products. I think now for me, doing long haul flights, I do need some kind of lay flat seat simply because operating so much. And I was at an ergonomics lecture last week, and it was basically like everybody's messed up with our ergonomics. So, and I feel it if I'm on a plane for more than like 6 to 8 hours in an economy seat, I get a lot of like upper back and neck spasm. So it's really helpful for me to have those business class flights for long haul. But what's been really special is the occasional chance to fly first class. So we recently got to fly Lufthansa first class. I booked with Miles and More points all the way from Johannesburg to Frankfurt to LA. So it was almost 24 hours in Lufthansa first class. That was like outstanding. Their service was absolutely incredible. And it even rivaled the Asian airlines, which I was surprised for a European airline, but it was absolutely a treat. The food was great. The service was outstanding. The bed was so comfortable and big and wide. We've also had the chance, earlier this year, we flew Singapore Suites, which is Singapore's, huge room that they're not flying to the US right now, but we flew from Delhi to Singapore when we were leaving India. That room was so big, I could do like lunges and sit-ups in the room. It was wild. It was a separate seat and a separate bed. Also, of course, outstanding service. This was a fantastic deal. I think it was 58,000 Singapore points, and Singapore is a transfer partner of every major credit card. So actually very accessible to get. We've also had the chance to fly ANA first class from the US to Japan. Again, just service cannot be beat. And all of these airlines give you, pajamas to sleep in. They have amazing food, the best champagne. I'm like, this is not my real life. But this is points. This is points. And while we could never imagine spending 10 or 20 grand on a flight, that is something we would never, ever do. But it's totally accessible with points. And so I think that's the really wild thing about it. So those are some of my favorite experiences.
I preach all these things about points, but fun fact, we've never taken a business class flight.
Oh,
So we booked Singapore Air for business class flights. We're gonna go to Singapore and the Maldives
yay!
coming up soon. Yeah, so excited about that. But even today, I got an alert for the Etihad, the apartment, and I was like,
I got that too.
I was like, yeah, so sign up for Thrifty Traveler. Shout out to Thrifty Traveler for all those alerts. And I was like, maybe I could just take the flight and I can just go by myself. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what's in Abu Dhabi, but hey, why not?
Totally enjoy. Oh, you're going to love Singapore business class. Some people criticize their seats. I'm somebody who likes a wider seat because, I don't know, maybe I'm a side sleeper, so I like all that room as opposed to a narrow seat with a door.
Yeah.
It's so comfortable. The flight attendants are so nice. They will take wonderful care of you and your family. And then the bad thing is you won't be able to go back to economy. So then you'll be spending those extra points on business class from now on.
Right, right. I'm like, yeah, now it's like me and like my kids and I like use my husband and we got my mom and my sister and maybe like some nieces. So like nobody's all of us are applying in business class. So it's like all or none.
It's true, and I would feel that way too. It's much easier to find seats for 2 than it is for 4 or 6, but some of the programs that are great for families or multiple people traveling together is Singapore, of course, especially if you're looking far out. They and programs like Flying Blue, Air France actually make a lot of business class awards available. So just starting to learn that and realizing like where can I find these seats will help you at least get to the continent you're going to in business class. And then once you're in the continent, fine, fly your shorter flights in economy, no big deal. And that's something we do too. Anything again less than 6 hours or so, economy's fine. But let's get to Asia in business class, and then the world is opened up to you from there.
Yes. And I just have to say, like, your goals. So all these things, I remember hearing about like the Singapore suites, and I think that's when I started looking at Singapore business class initially. And I'm like, oh, they don't fly Singapore suites from the United States. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll go to India and we can catch a flight.
That's
So just all
right.
these things you start thinking of. So it's I love to see like all you posting all these aspirational trips and like giving us goals so that way we know what's attainable, because if you don't know, then you don't know what to look for.
Exactly. And a lot of people ask like, "Well, where do I start my reward search?" Yeah, like we have lots of points, but what do you do with it? And that is the most challenging part because airlines don't want to open every seat for an award. They'd rather sell it. So how do you find the award space? And I always recommend starting with it's a free website. It's called flightconnections.com. And if you have a destination picked out, you can just see, like, who flies there and or who flies to the areas around that location. And that can be your jumping off point for, okay, these are the airlines or alliances that I need to look for to get to a certain area. And that gives you a starting point because it can be so overwhelming just to get started. But use flightconnections.com. Again, it's free and it'll just show you all the different airlines that go to a location. And then from that, use Google. Say, how do I, Google award redemptions for to this location, award redemptions on this airline. Again, it'll give you a starting point because it doesn't have to be overwhelming. And I love that the points game has changed over the years where it's becoming more accessible. The rules change all the time. That's kind of the fun part. It is becoming more accessible. And there's more and more tools out there for people to use, like you mentioned, Thrifty Traveler, where they send you alerts to say, hey, these seats are open. There's more and more tools out there for people to use to be able to use their points meaningfully, which is really exciting.
And one of those tools is you. So I see I saw that you have a points course that you teach.
Yeah, so I was getting a lot of requests like, "Hey, can you do this for m or can you help me book this, or do you do consultations?" And as much as I would love to, I think my full-time job gets in the way of my hobby a little bit, so I'm not able to help people one-on-one on a professional level, but I'm always happy to answer questions. However, because of that, I put together 2 different courses, a course for trainees or students, like people with lower incomes or maybe lots of debt or really low spending, because I think your strategy changes based on like what credit cards you have and what types of flights you'll be looking for based on where you are and your income and your training level right now. And then I put together a course also for attendings or high income professionals who want to really learn how to maximize their spending. And that was the way that I thought I could get the most information out to the most people without my job getting in the way of doing one-on-one consults. And I open these courses just a few times during the year so that enrollees can get attention and can get the support that they need from me. It'll be open right after Thanksgiving. I'm sure this will air later, but it'll be open again after the first of the year. So if you're looking for something, you're tired of buying things, you want to educate yourself on the benefits of points and miles, you can find my info. I'm at pointsandmilesdoc.com and also pointsandmilesdoc on Instagram. Please send me a message at any time. But also look through the page, because if you don't want to pay for a course, there's tons of free information there too. So I just want it to be accessible to everybody possible.
And I love that there's always free information available. And if you're willing to do the work and search for it, that's great. But I also like when there's things that are like focused and you know exactly you can go there and you know I have this much time and I want to learn these things, and you can go through and you can learn all the things that Kelly is teaching you. You can learn all the basics, things that you don't know. What's a sub? Like,
Yeah.
you know, which card do I sign up for first? I'm sure all those things will be covered. And if not, we're always happy to answer those questions for you. But like, I love that you're also reaching people who are higher income level brackets, and people who have businesses and higher expenses, and then as well as people who maybe don't spend as much. And I think, again, it does change. Like your strategy is going to change depending on where you fall in. But points travel is accessible to all of you. And I think that's an important point because I think I have listeners who range, both sides of the spectrum. So
Yeah, I love that. And I love it is accessible to everyone at every stage, at every income level. And the coolest part is it can really grow with you. So from when you start out to then when you have been in it a while, as your income change, as your situation change, or even the number of travelers you have is changing, that the points game can go with you. So it's just another resource to help optimize your finances and your life.
awesome. And so if people are wanting to know more about you, how can they find you?
Yeah, so Instagram is my main place, Points and Miles Doc, and then pointsandmilesdoc.com is where it's like a repository of info and podcasts and things like that I have.
Yeah, so make sure that you guys go and check out Points and Miles Doc on. I follow her on Instagram. She came and did a talk at the Point Me to First Class conference that we just held, which was wonderful.
That was so fun.
Yeah, it was such a good time and just like learning from like all these experts. So she's got a wealth of knowledge to offer you. So just make sure that you're following along so that way you can be up on all the ways to get to your next destination and to do it better.
Yeah, and thanks so much for what you're doing. Again, getting the info out there. I love your page as well. And the more of us like evangelizing points and miles and sustainable travel and setting up a system in your life where you get to take time off will just make us all better, make healthcare better. And and we can keep doing what we enjoy.
Yeah, I totally agree because I think it's important to remember that sustainable travel and sustainable anything, it's not about being perfect. It's about taking the little steps, making meaningful changes over time. So whether it's packing up your reusable essentials in your water bottle or, supporting local businesses and local communities or seeking out eco-friendly accommodations, you pretty much made an example of the things that are possible, things that you didn't consider before. And so I think that if we can continue to preserve the beauty of this world for our future generations, my kids and their kids, I think that's the way to go. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your perspective.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
All right. And thank you all for listening, for tuning in to Prescription of Travel MD. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure that you pass it along, share with a friend, leave a review, leave a 5-star review so that way other people know where to find us. And yeah, thanks for listening and we'll see you next time.